OK, well, let's take a look now at the day's business news and more dark clouds gathering over the global economy, unfortunately. Our business editor, however, Stephen Carroll, is here to explain a bit more. Stephen, how bad is it?
Eva, we've had these warnings for several months now of a slowdown in the global economy, but where we're starting to see it manifested is in the manufacturing industry. And this is after a raft of recent economic surveys pointing to the most widespread downturn in the manufacturing sector in 7 years. To get an idea of sentiment in factories, we look at data collected from decision makers and companies. It's called the Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI. JP Morgan's global PMI survey is now in its longest slump since 2012. The company IHS Markit says that in the Eurozone, the sentiment among purchasing managers is now the lowest it's been in almost 7 years. While in the United States, the Institute for Supply Management says that its index of manufacturing is now the lowest in 10 years, something that spooked the markets in trading on Tuesday. For many economists, the slowdown is due to the worries over the White House's trade policy. Earlier, we got the view of FXTM market analyst Han Tan.
The bigger worry would be if U.S. consumers, if they actually pull back on spending levels. So keep an eye on the jobs data due this Friday and also retail sales moving forward. Now, that could set off major alarm bells because U.S. consumers still comprise the primary growth driver for the U.S. But overall, you're right, the slowdown in the U.S. economy, that does not bode well for global demand and the economic rebound that's expected for 2020. I mean, keep in mind, after all, this is the world's largest economy that we're talking about here.
Well, after the falls on Wall Street over that data on Tuesday, let's take a look at how European markets have started the day today. And across London, Paris and Frankfurt, shares are trading in the red. Of course, we worry about the American economy because it's the biggest economy in the world and it has an impact everywhere else in the world too. Of course, investors will also be watching very closely Boris Johnson's speech on Brexit later too. In the Asian markets earlier, the Hong Kong markets have reopened after being closed earlier in the week. The Hang Seng down 0.1%, but falls across Tokyo and on the Kospi and Seoul as well, down by almost 2%. Of course, trade and the American economy would be a big concern for those markets as well. Moving on, Johnson & Johnson is to pay just over $20 million to settle claims over its role in the opioid addiction crisis in the state of Ohio. The company is the fourth drug maker to settle ahead of a trial set to begin in Cleveland later this month. The deal does not see Johnson & Johnson admit any liability. The company is still facing hundreds of other lawsuits over the opioid issue. Mark Zuckerberg says he will fight any attempt to break up Facebook as the social networking giant faces multiple investigations into its operations. In an apparently leaked audio recording of the CEO's meeting with employees obtained by tech news website The Verge, Zuckerberg responds to a call from Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren to break up big tech companies. Zuckerberg says he believes Facebook could win a legal case on the subject, as Catherine Bennett now reports.
It was a call to arms that was never meant to be heard outside of the company's walls. In leaked audio, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg tells employees that they would fight against any effort to break up the social media company.
I mean, I don't have to, have a major lawsuit against our own government. I mean, that's not like the position that you want to be in when you're, it's like we care about our country and want to work with our government to do good things. And but look, at the end of the day, if someone's going to try to threaten something that existential, you go to the mat and you fight.
It makes a change from Zuckerberg's more measured tone in public, where he's vowed to work more closely with regulators. US Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren has previously called to break up big tech, saying Silicon Valley faces little competition or accountability. She hit back on Twitter after the recording was published, accusing the firm of bulldozing the competition and undermining democracy. But economists say that breaking up big tech would only be a short-term solution, creating temporary competition until one company inevitably achieves market dominance. Researchers suggest one way of regulating competition would be enforcing interoperability, which would allow users to move their data from one social network to another.
So competition is possible because network externalities have been eliminated by forcing interoperability. And I think we can do the same with social media, and I think that's a much more powerful and long-lasting remedy.
Last week, the US Justice Department said that it was opening an antitrust investigation into Facebook. The social media giant is also facing probes led by the Federal Trade Commission and a group of state attorneys general across the United States.
Twitter says it's experiencing outages across its platform, and TweetDeck, the company, tweeted, perhaps ironically, that users may have trouble posting tweets or receiving notifications or direct messages. The Post says they're working on a solution to the problem, but gave no indication of its cause. And finally from me, growth in air travel could be cut in half as people feel more concerned about the environment. This is according to a survey from the Swiss bank UBS, which asked people in France, Germany, the US and the UK whether flight shame had affected their travel plans in the last year. Just over a fifth of the 6,000 respondents said they were cutting back on flying as a result. UBS says if this trend was borne out more widely, it could significantly reduce growth in air traffic, which is currently expanding between 4 and 5% every year. Eve.
I'd like to say, Stephen, that I've cut back on flying because of the environment, but it's more because airports have become so stressful.
Another good reason not to
if
fly.
I'm very honest. Stephen Carroll there, thanks a lot with our business update. Well, it's time for us to take a quick break now.